Okay, I think I'm going to get us started here. I want to welcome everybody to our webinar, Creating an Effective Virtual Classroom Using Remote Attendance Technology. My name is Mercy Erler, and I will be your host today for the webinar. I'm joining you from my home office in the beautiful city of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So today's webinar is brought to you by Attune. Attune is the global leader in training delivery solutions, including venues, virtual attendance platforms, learning lab technology, and event planning management. After the webinar, I do invite you to learn more about Attune at attune.com. So before we get into the content of today's webinar, I do want to share with you a few tips for participating during today's event. First, I encourage you to ask questions using the Q&A feature here in the Zoom panel. Our webinar content runs just shy of 30 minutes today, but please feel free to hang out here with us for a Q&A session where our presenters, Matt and Jerry, will answer your questions. In the event that we're not able to get to all the questions today, we'll be sure to address those via email. Also, during our event will be recorded as well. You'll be receiving a follow-up email with a link. So if you do want to share this event with colleagues, I encourage you to do so. Also in that follow-up email, we will be including a link to a very brief survey asking for your feedback about today's event. I do want to thank you in advance for just taking a minute or two to complete that survey to let us know what you thought and to provide any feedback for future webinars. So I encourage you to share the information you received today with your colleagues on social media. Please follow us at Attune Spaces and hashtag Attune Webinar so we may follow your contributions to the conversation today. At this time, I do want to introduce you to our presenters. Matt Linden is coming to us from his home office in Downers Grove, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. Matt is a senior solutions consultant with Attune and has worked with dozens of clients to help them implement their learning programs and leverage virtual learning solutions. And Jerry is broadcasting from his home out on the East Coast in Princeton, New Jersey. And Jerry is the vice president of sales at Attune and has a wealth of experience helping clients from almost every industry solve business issues, helping them to become more efficient. So at this time, we're going to get right into the content of the webinar, and I'm going to hand it over to Jerry, who's going to review the agenda. Jerry?
Hey, thank you, Mercy. And thanks, everyone, for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. As Mercy mentioned, my name is Jerry Neri, and I'm joining you from my home here in Princeton, New Jersey. We have a full agenda today, and I would like to run through the topics we have planned. First, we will touch on the current environment and the notable changes that have taken place in our lives, and specifically how it relates to training delivery today. We'll talk about moving forward from live to virtual, the three modes of delivery as we see them, and examples of where each method applies. We will then outline the requirements to move a live class to virtual if you plan on doing it yourself or partnering with a provider, and the steps you need to take, followed by considerations or best practices to ensure a successful event. Combining virtual attendance with virtual labs is a powerful solution if exercises or e-learning content are incorporated into the event. We'll touch on this topic. However, virtual training labs is a topic of our second webinar being held tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you're interested in virtual training labs, please plan on attending that session as well. We'll finish up with two client success stories where we have been able to help clients continue their training programs in our current environment by taking advantage of Attune's virtual attendance. Finally, we'll summarize our session today and allow ample time for questions. So let's get started. The current crisis has changed the way we think about everything: our families, how we behave, what we do, more importantly, what we don't do or can't do given this current environment. Just 60 days ago, the term social distancing did not even exist, and we went about our lives in a very carefree and unconcerned fashion. All that's changed, and we now think constantly about avoiding gatherings, keeping our distance, and of course, keeping our hands clean and sanitized. Whatever the outcome, the future will look differently, especially regarding how we meet, interact, gather socially and professionally. As it relates to training, companies have been thinking about virtual delivery for some time. This training has accelerated into action, with some organizations already delivering a portion of their training virtually, while others are attempting to figure it out. Today, we're going to talk about the journey of migrating from live to virtual. And I've asked Matt Linden to take us on that journey and provide some insight on getting started and the requirements and best practices to ensure a successful event. Turning it over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Jerry, and thanks everyone once again for joining us. So for the purposes of today's webinar, just to add some context, we are focusing primarily on live instructor-led training. Now, there are basically three methods of delivery when it comes to instructor-led learning, and each of these has their own inherent strengths and weaknesses. So we're going to take a bit of a closer look at these modalities and then talk a bit about the benefits and limitations of each. Now, the most common delivery of instructor-led training would probably be physical classroom-based learning. Now, everyone on our call today probably has some sort of familiarity with this. Now, the primary benefit of classroom training is that it is the most immersive method of learning. Two-way conversation is natural. Like collaborative group work is as simple as sliding chairs around the classroom. But geography can be a limitation in this case. Attending an event in person is easy enough for a local student, but anyone living further away would clearly have to travel to attend. This comes with added costs of flights, hotel stays, or even just the downside of being away from home for an extended period. And now, of course, in the middle of a public health crisis, which is forcing us to all practice social distancing, as Jerry mentioned, gathering together in a confined classroom is basically impossible right now. Therefore, we need to think about alternate methods when it comes to delivering our learning content. Which brings us to virtual training, or in this context, using collaboration technology to gather instructors and students together remotely. There are quite a few platforms on the market right now to accomplish this. Some would be Zoom or WebEx or GoToMeeting and dozens of others. And of course, most of these are capable of sharing content. But choosing the right platform for your specific needs should be dictated by the nature of your content. For example, if it's purely informational and maybe shorter in duration, a webinar format, kind of like we're using here, would probably be your best option. But if your communication or if your curriculum requires more collaboration or discussion, like between students and instructor, then you might want to consider a platform more conducive to two-way video and two-way audio between all the people attending. Now, the main benefit of virtual, of course, would be accessibility. Instead of being restricted by geography, anyone with an internet connection can attend a virtual event, especially with most laptops and mobile devices these days incorporating built-in cameras and microphones. But there are still some limitations here. Some more experienced instructors, let's say, can tend to be hesitant when it comes to incorporating new technology into the way they teach. And some of these platforms also have some limitations when it comes to replicating a live classroom. You also need to consider support for your instructor and students, as issues are inevitable when it comes to incorporating technology into anything, really. And finally, students and instructors might miss out on some of the smaller perks, like free lunches or fresh baked cookies in the afternoon, for anyone that's been to one of our Attune venues. However, due to the current crisis, many organizations that have been putting this off up until now are really being forced to take a serious look at converting their learning content to virtual. And as Jerry mentioned earlier, it's very possible that this situation we find ourselves in could have very long-lasting effects and change our way of life and the way we do business moving forward. And finally, hybrid training draws from the advantages of the two models I just mentioned by essentially blending them together. By combining classroom and virtual, some of your students, or in some cases even your instructor, or perhaps like guest speakers or subject matter experts, would basically have the option to join your event remotely. We've even seen some anecdotal evidence in our experience that hybrid training actually promotes higher student satisfaction scores than a strictly virtual training or even a fully on-site training. When done correctly, you can basically create a fully immersive blended environment that allows on-site and remote students to collaborate together for group discussions. Now, that said, Clearly, this is not the time to be leveraging anything that has any sort of classroom or physical meeting component. But it's still worth considering, especially as we start to emerge from this hibernation we're in now, and people start to become more and more willing to once again meet in person. Again, allowing those virtual attendance for your students can help to bolster registrations as we kind of find ourselves in this ramp-up phase. Now, before making the jump to virtual, it's important to evaluate your curriculum to make sure that it's actually suitable for that form of delivery. And again, while these platforms are designed for collaboration, some training simply requires hands-on access to physical objects or equipment, which can be hard to translate to a virtual platform. For example, a nursing student might benefit from e-learning or even virtual instruction when it comes to studying anatomy, but it's pretty hard to replicate sticking an IV into a vein or taking a blood pressure over video. Now, assuming your curriculum does translate, next you would need to focus on purchasing a collaboration platform. This typically includes buying a license or maybe multiple licenses for virtual meeting rooms and then determining how those rooms will be supported during your live events. Next, consider investing in some equipment, especially if you're planning to offer this virtual training on a long-term basis. An instructor's laptop with a built-in webcam, can get the job done temporarily, but high-def cameras and microphones will actually help to produce a more professional product, especially if your students are paying to attend your training. Also, a large monitor for your instructor will help to enable a better view of those virtual students, which can go a long way in replicating a physical classroom experience from the instructor's perspective. It's hard to see if a student is nodding off if you can't see their face on screen. Now, once you've built your solution, next you need to start thinking about support, both for your students and for your instructors. As I mentioned earlier, some instructors can be a bit less tech savvy or willing to adopt technology. So you want to make sure they're comfortable with the tech they're going to be using before they are asked to actually use it in a live event. Also, you don't want your instructor to be the tech support person for that training event. The last thing you want is a whole class getting held up because one student can't get their camera to work. Instead, you want to have some sort of live or even online support in place for your attendees. Finally, it's also important to establish a backup plan in case your platform has problems, or if your instructor or students have trouble connecting to the meeting, or if they experience an internet outage, for example. Most of these platforms offer a dial-in option over the phone that allows the user to listen in and even take part in a conversation, although they wouldn't be able to see video or any of the content being shared. But again, that's like a last case scenario or worst case scenario. So what are some of the more important items to consider when deciding on an approach to all virtual or to even to hybrid training delivery? First, how large is your audience? Are you disseminating information to a large group, let's say 50 or more people? If so, a webinar format would, again, probably be your best option because communication in that case flows in one direction from your facilitator to your audience without a lot of back and forth. Now, if your content is more interactive and is typically taught to a smaller group or a smaller audience, a two-way platform is a better choice, especially if your instructor is accustomed to leading discussions or if your curriculum calls for working in small groups. Again, you want all students to be able to hear and see each other to better replicate that live in-person experience. And also, again, how proficient are your instructors when it comes to technology, and how much support are they going to actually need? This might actually influence your decision-making process when you choose a platform, especially as you think about that ramp-up phase to get them comfortable with the tool. Some organizations will even leverage an assistant instructor when it comes to managing virtual students. These helpers can do things like answer questions through chat. They can assign students to breakout sessions or even be kind of that first level of support for technical issues. Also, think about how you're going to obtain feedback from your students that attend your events. A lot of these platforms offer some sort of polling or built-in surveys, although typically these are only really available in a webinar format. That said, there are tons of websites out there. SurveyMonkey is probably the most popular example, which would allow you to email surveys to your students to get their feedback. And then finally, you want to ensure your instructor has the right equipment in order to produce a high-quality professional presentation. This includes bandwidth, enough bandwidth to run a video meeting, as well as some of the video and audio equipment I mentioned earlier. Now, at this point, I just want to take a moment to touch on virtual lab tools. This may be of interest to those of you that are looking to deliver software or computer-based training in a more of a virtual format. Combining a lab with a collaboration tool, this type of solution can help to replicate a physical computer classroom. Employing a combination of virtual collaboration and virtual labs allows your students to access a uniform pre-configured lab setup, basically by using the internet or a built-in browser that they have on their own home device. Instructors can then facilitate lessons and discussions through the collaboration platform, but also monitor remote students in the lab environment as they're working on exercises. Most of these labs also even allow instructors to take control of those virtual machines if they need to. Now, if you are interested in learning more about virtual computer labs and also leveraging them to deliver training, please think about joining our webinar tomorrow, as that will be the main topic of our discussion. You should be able to join that event or register for it using the same invite you used for today's event. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Jerry, who's going to take a moment to talk about some of our clients that have actually leveraged virtual collaboration in the past to support live events. Jerry?
Thanks, Matt. Now I would like to present two success stories where clients have benefited from a virtual attendance solution. The first is the Center for Professional Advancement, or CFPA. As an organization, CFPA provides accredited technical training and continuing education worldwide. Their challenge was they had been hosting their events at one of our locations in New Jersey, our partner locations. And with the advent of coronavirus, the venue was mandated by the state of New Jersey to close its doors for at least 30 days. And they were faced with a decision to either try and continue their classes or to cancel the events. The solution was to work with Attune to implement an all virtual training solution where participants, including the instructor, were remote. The solution the elements of the solution was a full virtual platform licensing for all instructors and attendees, a support link listing requirements and connectivity testing procedures, and training for the instructor on teaching a class virtually. The benefits for CFPA are what you see listed here. CFPA was able to run the class on schedule seamlessly without having to cancel. They were also able to retain their revenue stream, so there was no loss of revenue for those events. Also, CFPA is now prepared with an alternative should another crisis arise, or should a facility be closed or something of that nature where they can't conduct a session live. And finally, their customers appreciated the fact that the classes were not canceled and they were able to attend, as you can see from the quote listed on the right from one of the attendees. Next up is TDWI. TDWI is Transforming Data and Intelligence. They're a division of 1105 Media, their parent company. Their business is to provide individuals and teams with technical education and research. They use a variety of modalities, including e-learning courses, on-site education, as well as public conferences and seminars. Their challenge was to continue training in a pandemic environment where government ordinances were mandating shelter in place. In addition, TDWI started receiving a number of cancellations and refund requests from customers that had registered for their live instructor-led programs. TDWI was faced with the potential of losing substantial revenue, so they needed a viable solution quickly. The solution was to leverage Attune's virtual attendance platform to deliver training to a virtual audience. This option allowed instructors to teach from an Attune facility and utilize a professional venue and high-tech equipment to deliver the course content. Learners were connected to the classroom remotely and could interact with both fellow participants and the instructor. TDWI did not have to invest in expensive equipment or licenses or worry about technical setup or connectivity issues. The benefits for TDWI is what you see listed here. They were able to conduct the class without cancellation, so no loss in revenue. They were also able to satisfy their clients' needs, as clients didn't want the classes canceled either. And then finally, the classes worked out so well that they want to leverage virtual technology in the future when they can return to live and hybrid classes and expand to wider audiences and maximize their ROI. So in terms of collaboration support that Attune can provide, we have separated the two virtual models, live virtual and hybrid. As you may recall, virtual is when all the students, including the instructor, are virtual. In this model, Attune can provide all the support required for the event, including platform licensing for the instructor and attendees, a secure platform and virtual room for all attendees, a support link to a page listing requirements and testing procedures, as Matt mentioned earlier, Attune contact information for support both pre and during the event, and an instructor walkthrough to review processes and procedures for virtual instruction. When it is safe to return to live in-classroom training, you may want to think about a hybrid model where learners that prefer attending remotely are able to do so. And we're able to support that delivery as well. And supporting a hybrid delivery model, Attune provides all of the support you see in live virtual above. In addition, we also include a professional Class A office environment, high quality video and audio equipment, snacks and beverages for your live attendees and instructor, and optional catering for all attendees at a reasonable cost. Supporting a virtual and hybrid events is what we do best as a company for over 26 years, having supported hundreds of clients in virtual delivery over those years. So now to summarize and provide some key takeaways. The current crisis has changed the way we think about everything and behave with each other, including our clients. Virtual training delivery is becoming more popular than ever. The way we see it, there are two paths you can take regarding a solution, either to build your own solution or to partner with an organization. If you decide to build, here are some of the requirements and things you'll want to consider. Certainly the platform licensing, as Matt mentioned earlier, there are a number of platforms out there, Zoom, GoToMeeting, BlueJeans, Adobe Connect, et cetera, as well as dozens of others. So you want to make sure you have the licensing in place. High quality audio and video equipment, the microphones, the cameras, et cetera, would need to be in place for a quality event. Connectivity and bandwidth testing, making sure that you test the environment before you deliver the class to make sure that remote attendees can get connected and you have sufficient bandwidth to conduct the event. And then, of course, support during, pre and during the event. So you want to make sure that someone is available. Again, as Matt mentioned earlier, you don't want the instructor doing the troubleshooting of that event if someone has trouble connecting a camera or has trouble getting onto the session. And then finally, instructor training, making sure that the instructor is comfortable in front of the camera, making sure that they have some familiarity with virtual delivery and they're able to, again, feel comfortable in that environment. If you decide to partner, you want to choose an organization that has the infrastructure and plan in place and has a track record of delivering virtual events for hundreds of clients. So that concludes our session today. I'll turn it back to Mercy, who will open things up for any questions you might have.
Thanks, Jerry. We've received one question so far, and I do want to encourage everybody to use the Q&A feature right now and ask your questions. So let's see. Our first question is, what is the software program that you're currently using for virtual meetings?
Sure, I can take that. So primarily, Attune does partner with Zoom. They've been a longtime partner of ours, and we've actually worked with them to customize their platform for our use. We use that platform both for fully virtual events as well as hybrid events, where you're delivering training from one of our classrooms, and we're supporting that with our equipment as well as Zoom. Now that said, we also have hosted and supported events where we've used other platforms. So point being is that we're not completely dedicated to utilizing Zoom. You know, if you're comfortable with a better platform and you want to deliver an event from one of our venues, for example, and you use WebEx or Adobe Connect, we're actually able to support that as well. But, you know, going back to the original question, we primarily do partner with Zoom.
Yeah, just wanted to comment that as well. Yeah, our platform, as Matt mentioned, is Zoom. And Zoom, as you know, Zoom is ubiquitous out there. A lot of folks are using that. And we've actually done some customization to that to make it specifically a good platform for delivery of training. So we added some things to that off-the-shelf product to make it more suitable for the training environment.
Great, thank you for that added explanation, Jerry. So somebody wants to know the differences between, maybe you can review the hybrid and virtual environment as it relates to the labs.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, to clarify, when we're talking about fully virtual, essentially everyone attending that event, whether it's a student or an instructor or a guest speaker, they're dialing in using video from their own home, their own office, their own computer, essentially. When we're presenting hybrid as an option, what we mean by that is, you know, having a contingency of students and an instructor in a classroom, but also having the option to dial in virtual attendees for that event. And going back to what I mentioned earlier about that, you know, clearly right now we can't, in most states at least, you cannot support hybrid events because there are stay-at-home orders in place. But once states start to open up again and companies are trying to start to, you know, increase registrations for in-person events, having that the additional option of dialing in virtual students for an in-person event can help to bolster registrations for that event and make that event more viable.
Thanks, Matt. So somebody wants to know how we've addressed the whole Zoom bombing issue. And this particular individual actually stopped using Zoom because of that. So, and you mentioned that we do use the Zoom platform. So if you can just address how we address the issue with Zoom.
Yes, absolutely. So we are obviously very aware of what's going on with Zoom as far as the global news goes. Now, and obviously it's a very big concern making sure that your meetings are secure. That's something that as a company or an organization, we have always taken that very seriously. So when we host events using the Zoom platform, those meetings are secure. They're password encrypted, so you cannot, like, not anyone can just dial into your event. What has essentially been happening is that with so many people jumping onto the Zoom bandwagon recently because of the fact that they do offer like a free like option if you want to have like really short 40-minute meetings. A lot of people were adopting Zoom and using it, but not really putting the security protocols that already existed into place. So what's been happening is that like individuals can essentially randomly guess a number, a 7-digit number, and bounce in and out of like random meetings. Because those meetings weren't protected by a password. So with that very small incremental step, like we do support fully protected private meetings that you've only have attendees that were invited to that meeting.
Thanks. So can a panel of speakers present together when they're all remote? Like, how does that work? What's that configuration look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it kind of depends on how large your audience is and what your content is. There's a few different ways you can approach that. As you see here today, like through a webinar format, like we have a panel here. We've specifically intentionally designed this so that you only see one of us at a time. Only one of us is speaking. That said, Zoom and other platforms do promote like multi-screen videos. So for example, if Mercy and Jerry and I all wanted to be on screen at once, we certainly could support that model so that you see all of us simultaneously. We all can join in the conversation and answer questions sort of in a more fluid format. But yes, absolutely. We've even supported events where we have multiple instructors or multiple SMEs dialing into a meeting and then all contributing to the content of that meeting. So, so yes, short answer is yes, you can support that.
Yeah, just wanted to add to that, Matt. Prior to the current environment we're in today, where virtual has really kind of taking on a higher level of importance and visibility today, Where we had been using, and actually really where our customers have been using, you know, the virtual offering is, let's say for again, any students or participants that wanted to attend that were remote, but also it was used for if an executive or a division leader within the company wanted to come in and spend, you know, 10 minutes or 15 minutes kicking off a session. If it was a meeting, for example, they could do that. So instead of flying that person in for a 20-minute spot on the agenda, they could attend remotely, virtually, and then disconnect from the meeting and then the training session, and it could go on. So that's kind of how we developed the virtual offering to begin with.
Thank you. So we had an attendee ask how multiple Attune locations can be used in conjunction together for a meeting or a conference.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something we've supported quite a few times, actually. So we're very familiar with that format. Essentially what, in this case, like Attune has multiple locations across the US and even internationally. What we could do is support an event where you have attendees coming into our venues in different cities, and then we actually handle the entire setup of coordinating the video meetings between those locations. Every location has its own equipment as far as video and audio is concerned. Every location has on-site support to support the technical event itself. And then basically what you're able to do in that case is combine attendees from different parts of the country to join a meeting together and collaborate together. Taking that a step further, we've even had events where, you know, maybe you had like 100 or 150 people in one location, and you wanted to bring them all to one of our facilities for maybe a conference with breakout sessions. We've even hosted events where you have 3 or 4 classrooms at one of our venues with attendees in separate rooms, but then we supported connecting those rooms together to have a group discussion and then breaking out for separate sessions. So yeah, there's a couple of different ways we can approach that, but we absolutely have done that before.
Thanks, Matt. We had another question here related to how Attune supports instructors with equipment and the use of that equipment.
Yeah, so when it comes to our venues and delivering events from our Attune facilities, we do provide all the equipment for that event, as far as high-def cameras with pan and zoom functionality, high-def microphones, very large monitors that they can actually see the remote students on. We also support providing a computer for that instructor if needed so that they can present materials to that meeting. And then in addition to that, there's a live tech person on site that also, you know, troubleshoot, like gets everything going in the beginning of the event and is there for your instructor as far as supporting the event in case something goes wrong. Now, as far as fully virtual events, we don't ship out equipment, if that's the question. Really, that would be more focused on delivering events from our venues. Now, that said, we have actually, especially lately, supported quite a few events where only an instructor comes into our facility and then delivers training from our classroom. There's quite a bit of value to that, again, being the equipment and as well as the on-site support.
So Matt, we had an attendee also want you to explain if you could run an event from multiple locations at once and also have remote speakers. So if you could just elaborate a little bit more on that configuration, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, going back to what I was sort of explaining about connecting multiple classrooms, whether it's in one facility or multiple Attune facilities, you still also have the flexibility of fully virtual attendees joining that event. So just kind of paint the picture here. If you're presenting from a classroom in Chicago at our Attune facility, you also have Attune San Francisco and Attune New York and Attune Atlanta all dialing in. I, as the presenter, see a different box for every classroom that's dialed in. Now, if I also have additional subject matter experts or presenters dialing in, they also have their own box in that meeting. So really, you're seeing everyone on screen at one time that's dialed into the event. And then everyone has the ability to contribute to that event, whether it's just by speaking or by presenting materials through the Zoom platform.
Okay, so we had somebody ask about other platforms like GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar. Do we support those?
Yes, the answer is yes. So as far as hybrid events go or delivering events from our venues, we do have the capability to support other platforms like GoToWebinar or GoToMeeting. Now that said, as far as delivering fully virtual events, total transparency, we don't really partner with those companies, so we don't bring a lot of value to supporting a GoToMeeting event when it comes to fully virtual. But again, if you want to come in, if your instructor wants to deliver from a Tune facility, and you want to use GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar as your platform, we can actually customize our solution to use that platform.
Great. We had somebody ask about support for instructors globally. So how are we able to do that?
So that actually kind of depends. So I'd like to kind of learn more about that specific scenario. You know, whether it's an instructor teaching to global students or if it's a global instructor teaching to a global audience. To be honest, I think it's kind of hard to answer that question on the fly, but if that individual wants to communicate one-on-one, I'd be happy to kind of learn more about what they're looking for. We can try to answer their questions on a one-on-one chat.
Yes, and you know, we are going to be digging in deeper on the subject of virtual attendance and virtual training labs in a subsequent webinar series. So definitely check your email for those dates and times. We do have one last question. And this is really kind of digging into the best practices around the duration of a, you know, virtual event, a meeting, conference. You know, what's too long for a remote conference, and do we provide any best practices to our clients regarding that?
Yeah, that's another great question. And to be honest, the answer again is it kind of depends, which I hate to give that answer, but let me elaborate on that a little bit. So, you know, that question comes up quite often, like how long should I keep my students all on a video? Can I do an 8-hour session or 3 consecutive 8-hour sessions across a week? Really, it kind of depends on the content you're teaching. We've seen clients, for example, converting fully in class 3-day 8-hour sessions to fully virtual. And they've had a lot of success doing that. Really kind of comes down to how much collaboration is involved, or like how much engagement your instructor is able to leverage through a virtual platform. That said, virtual does give you some flexibility in how you format your events. I mean, especially in the last couple of months, we have seen quite a few clients changing their format from what normally would have been a 3 full day class to now doing 5 half days. And maybe the instructor kind of adjusts like their timing for each module. But that gives the students a chance to, you know, attend for a half day, you know, get off camera for the other half of the day, absorb what they learned, and then come back the next day. So I guess, again, in this case, it really kind of depends on what you're looking to deliver. But again, virtual gives you the flexibility to kind of make that adjustment.
Okay, well, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Jerry, for the information that you shared today. I think it was very useful in learning how to convert those in-person events to virtual. Again, I just want to reiterate that we will be diving into these topics a little bit further in another webinar series coming up in the next couple weeks. So please keep an eye out on that. If you have any questions or comments, I ask you to reach out to me at marketing@attune.com. I'll make sure that I either answer those questions or forward those to the appropriate people who can help you out best. So I just want to end the webinar now and tell you to all have a great day.